Hey guys, welcome back. So now, at this point, following after the conclusion of Thor, the Devourer King, I wanted to take a deeper dive into what I mentioned with the possibility of Thor seeing the second coming of Thanos wins. But before we dive in, I just want to let you guys know that Fortnite Season 4 Nexus War has just released. So now's the perfect time to jump in, and if you haven't downloaded Fortnite already, you can use my link in the description below, download Fortnite for free, and play as a number of Marvel characters, both heroes and villains, as they prepare for Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. So special thanks to Epic Games for sponsoring this video, and I'm not gonna front, I really want to see how that ends. But we'll talk a bit more about that later in this video, because seeing Devourer King Thor with the thunder crackling throughout his chest, and when I seen this, I was like, okay, somebody cared. Somebody really cared when they put this guy in the game. Well done. But let's get into it. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so at this point, following all of our talks about the Devourer King event and how that concluded with the Black Winter, showing Thor how he would eventually die. And one of the first things that I want to point out before we get into how this could play out is how in the case of Galactus, the Black Winter showed in a number of forms to Galactus before it finally took the form of Thor. And this initially makes me think a couple things, because one, we really don't know how much of that backstory of Galactus seeing these different forms was necessarily true, because the Black Winter has already proven that Galactus, his storytelling isn't quite the most honest, to say the least. But with keeping that in mind, if it were true and the Black Winter appeared to Galactus in a number of forms before appearing to him as Thor, who in turn was the deliverer of his destruction, then this would lead us to the chance of when we had seen what Thor had witnessed with his end, which we're just gonna call Thanos wins 2 for right now. But if what Galactus had said was true, then it would leave the possibility of Thor's vision of darkness and everything ending with Thanos and the Infinity Hammer, it would lead for the possibility of this future being one that had a chance to be changed. But my second part of that point is that is not likely the case, because when the Black Winter arrived, we had seen him take on the appearance of Thor, meaning that Thor would be the way that Galactus would then die. Then after that, we then saw that this were to be true, which at this point makes the words of the Black Winter valid. In the words of Galactus, not so much. And I gotta say, since we talked about this, there has been an ongoing conversation on my Discord where you guys have been going back and forth about Thor killing Galactus. And there's been some in Galactus's corner, there's been some in Thor's corner, but I kid you not, when I seen this, I went to sleep Tuesday night, just reading a bit of the conversation beats, and then I got up the next morning, just looked on Discord, and somebody was still typing. I was like, what is going on? I woke up the next day to the talk bubble still going, and I was just like, okay, this is serious. But what I want to do here is two things, because one, I want to get into why I believe this could possibly be Thanos Wins Part 2, but then after that, I also want to talk about a few ideas of how this could actually unfold into Thor's future from the conclusion of the Devourer King moving forward. But before we even get into the whole idea of how this whole thing could be Thanos Wins Part 2, first we got to get into the concept of what Thanos Wins was. And prior to this point, we've talked about Thanos Wins and what led up to it, and a number of important factors that went into how it played out. So for that reason, I won't go too deep into the narrative of the story. But just to reiterate the concept, with Thanos Wins in the full scope, taking place millions of years in the future, Donny Cates created this event, and he told the story that painted this picture and showed us that at some point in the future, no matter how long it takes, eventually the ultimate destruction of every hero and every significant force in the universe, that they will eventually lose to Thanos, because over the course of time he just accumulates more power and he becomes stronger and stronger, because in the end, even if that be millions of years from now, Thanos eventually wins. And even though that story concluded with Thanos seeming to win the Heart of Death but then rejecting her and going back in time, which effectively was the ending of that event, but even with doing so, there's still certain things that need to play out so that they can then arrive later at some point in that storyline. Which brings me to the first part of my theory of us heading into Thanos Wins Part 2. Because right now at this point, at the end of Thor the Devourer King, we have Silver Surfer Black, who still very much resembles the Fallen One who we had seen in Thanos Wins. But if that is to be true, I firmly believe that before we get to Thanos Wins 2, that first the Surfer has to play his part in Thanos Wins 1. which will likely unfold with Thor telling the Surfer what he had seen, which will either lead us down a path of Silver Surfer Black versus Thor, with us getting a version of the Surfer who's trying to prevent this future from happening, which could cause a rift of ideals between the Surfer and Thor. And if this is the case, it'll bring a whole new definition to what we had seen in Thanos Wins, to where at the time we brushed through a bit of the Surfer's known history. But it's like if we read it again now, after Thor the Devourer King, it's almost like that story is intentionally telling us like, well, you know the Surfer, he commits treason against Devourers, like that's just something that he does. But then it also lets us know that there's another story that's missing, with him falling from the heavens, which is likely Asgard, which from there was vaguely described as like his tale of redemption. And at the time, like the reasoning that we didn't get this in-between story, it was mainly because after the Fallen One had arrived and Thanos won again, like nobody was alive to actually tell the story. But with this version of the Surfer's story ending here, and also leaving Thor's hammer in the future, which I'll get to more about on the second part. But with us knowing this darker version of the Surfer, he now has this high probability of playing out that untold story and going up against Thor, who's not as powerful as he was during Devourer King, but going from there and taking us into this narrative that will then unfold the true definition of everything that Thor had seen, to where with what the Black Winter had shown him, his answer was darkness. It wasn't specifically Thanos, it wasn't specifically Marvel Zombies, but instead his answer was just darkness. And within that darkness, I still believe Marvel Zombies is a part of it, I still believe Thanos is a part of it, but even furthermore, I believe that the Surfer is a part of it, because I also believe, and I know this one's out there, but I also believe that Thanos has turned Silver Surfer Black into a Null/Necro Sword Gauntlet, which is what we'll get into for my theory on Thanos Wins Part 2, just after this quick word about our sponsor. Because now with Fortnite Season 4 available to play, they are now featuring Marvel characters Storm, She-Hulk, Doctor Doom, Wolverine, Thor, and more. And on top of all these characters arriving in the game, they also have more arriving this season. And with this happening, not only do we have Marvel's characters arriving in Fortnite, but on top of that, there will be a number of locations showing up in Fortnite this season as well, which are locations like Doom's Domain and the Sentinel Graveyard, just to name a couple. But on top of that, like check this out. So each character, they have their unique abilities in gameplay, like Doom using arcane gauntlets or Groot creating shields. But then on top of that, I've been informed that they'll also be including Silver Surfer's board, which just goes to show you right there, like on top of everything that we've just seen in these trailers, that there is more to come. So use my link in the description below and choose from any of these characters as Thor unites everyone to save the world from the Devourer Galactus. And like with the way that this is set up, because you guys know I'm interested in story before anything, but with the way that this is set up with Thor only having part of his memory and bringing in the other Marvel heroes and villains for help to team up against Galactus, who looks like he's straight out of the Devourer King, it just had me thinking like, man, now he's got to eat Fortnite to face the Black Winter. And on top of that, when Thor gets his memory back, everybody in Fortnite's gonna know Galactus' secret. But we'll see if that's what happens, I don't know yet. But use my link in the description below and hop into Fortnite Season 4 so that you can take part in the Nexus War. Alright, so continuing my thoughts on the Devourer King leading into a Thanos Wins Part 2, it's here where I only want to use the time travel that we've already seen established. But even with doing so, I will acknowledge that it was a huge part of the first Thanos Wins. And it's because of this and the way that time travel works within Marvel Comics, like when someone travels through time and they start to change certain events, eventually a new timeline or a new alternate reality will branch off. And after Thanos Wins, when Thanos returned back to the present, this then began the course of that action, making it so that this timeline in some way or form would then play out differently. But because Thanos eventually wins, that still gotta somehow happen. And so now continuing through this, we first gotta start with like the elephant in the room, because we know when Thanos at first came back, he was killed by Gamora. And I remember back when that happened, it's like, okay, we were quickly shown that Thanos is not gonna be a thing for a while. And for a while he wasn't, until we got to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 5, where we then found out that there was this plan to then resurrect Thanos, which we had discovered after his will and testament was pulled from his body, which then led the investigation of the heroes trying to find out who Thanos was coming back through, which at the time most people thought was Gamora. But then when his body was stolen by the Black Order, which then began Silver Surfer Black, which from there was a story that connected the Silver Surfer to Null going forward into the current timeline. But also with this, the Surfer had this new fear that someday that he would become a destroyer. But with this being the case also in your present day, like the whole mystery of Gamora being the one who had Thanos' consciousness, it had been eventually revealed that it was actually Star Fox, the brother of Thanos. And when everyone had found out, Gamora had then tried to kill Star Fox in order to prevent Thanos from getting his body back, but instead of this killing him, him, he actually woke up with a broken mind because Gamora had killed Star Fox while the consciousness of Thanos was being transferred back into his body, but nonetheless effectively resurrecting Thanos. But then after this, which is where I believe that Thanos Wins Part 2 begins, because right after Thanos' resurrection, in the Guardians' attempt to stop him, they then hit him with the same black hole creating missile, which just like with the Silver Surfer, it can place you anywhere within space and time, and whatever future or past the writer wants to take it to. But in Guardians Volume 5 Issue 6, this was the conclusion of Thanos' resurrection, where Thanos and Hela got sucked into the black hole, the new Guardians of the Galaxy, they got away, and that was it. But I believe that this is where Thanos takes his trip into the future, to where he then takes Thor's hammer, which he'll later use to put the stones in, but then also with the hand and other remains of Silver Surfer Black, aka the Fallen One, he'll use those to create that gauntlet, which we had seen on the other hand. But then on top of that, with Thanos being stuck in this future with Hela, with a castle that's made out of the bones of Celestials and filled with all sorts of relics from all over the Marvel Universe, he would have all of those at his disposal, plus the other shard of the Time Stone that Thanos had left behind with the deceased body of his older self, which then just gives him the opportunity to come back to the present day. But this time with Hela at his allegiance, who would then be the answer to the Marvel Zombies type of army of which Thanos would then have behind him. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I mainly wanted to share my thoughts of how this could become Thanos Wins 2, and really with just how the way that his recent arc with Guardians of the Galaxy had ended, how it very much feels like it's gonna play a part in this mysterious event that Thor was shown by the Black Winter that'll inevitably come in his future. But let me know your thoughts and theories down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.